Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
So we are now 2 weeks later. This is the second half of our interview with Jim Johnson, project manager and poobah extraordinaire for Modiphius Star Trek Adventures line. Just to catch you up, if you haven't, I would strongly suggest you go back and listen to our prior episode, which is the intro, where we talk a lot about the new upcoming release of the Lower Decks source book.
This is where we need Will Wheaton to do his ready room red alert.
Oh yeah, we should maybe.
Yeah.
What is it? If we use less than 10 seconds of audio, it doesn't cost anything from a copyright perspective. Maybe we could plagiarize for that. I probably shouldn't advocate.
I'm glad we are recording this.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
So moving on.
Hey, your fault. But yeah, a lot of good info about Lower Decks and we talk about the entry point to the game.
Yes.
And now coming into this half, there's some interesting topics. One of them we'll kind of highlight after this, but I would ask you, as you are listening, think of this phrase: RPG as lit.
Yep, RPGs as literature. This is something you and I have been talking about for quite some time. Emily Careboss, 2 episodes ago, really ran with this. But I'll just point out before we transition over to the interview, the second half of the interview, that we had the good fortune to reach out to someone like Emily Careboss, because you'll hear toward the end of chatting with Jim.
Yep.
He made a comment to the effect
I don't know if that was on the recording, though. I'll be honest with you, to break the fourth wall here. I think we had an additional discussion about this after we hit stop. I think we covered some of it. We did cover some of it.
Nope, I think you're right. Yeah. So we didn't realize where he was going when he was talking about this. And when we paused, and we just, because it's Jim, so we invariably talk for another half an hour.
Yeah.
Because the man just apparently never sleeps.
Mm-hmm.
But you are right, Brad. One of his closing comments was, well, he just looks at this stuff as literature. And you and I just stopped. It's like, well, you and I have been talking about this for about a year, and we thought, this sounds really dumb in retrospect, we thought we were the only ones. Like, we probably just enjoy reading what everybody else is playing. And we said that to him, and he's like, I don't think so. I think this is an exceptionally common experience. And that kind of rocked our worlds.
Yes. And we had additional discussion about it. And I think this is something that we're going to talk more about in future episodes. And thank Jim, thanks to you, because you kind of were the burr in the saddle, that really kind of triggered us saying, okay, we really can run with this as a discussion topic, and it's not going to completely bore people.
Right. It certainly isn't boring us, so you guys are all pretty much just held captive to that. So while you're here and held captive, why don't we go on to part 2 of our interview with the indomitable Jim Johnson of Star Trek Adventures with Modiphius. Jim Johnson is the author of the Pistols and Pyramids series, the Potomac Shadows series, and other prose fiction series currently under development. He has written sundry other pieces of fiction, including several stories published in the Star Trek universe, and has freelanced for pen and paper role-playing game companies, including Modiphius, Star Trek Adventures, Decipher, the Lord of the Rings RPG, and White Wolf, Mage the Ascension. Jim lives in historic Alexandria, Virginia, with his wife, toddler, and a pair of crazy cats.
You brought up a good point that I didn't even think of, is that because I've been playing I took a break, but I played online for a lot, STO. And I have to imagine, like you said, there are people that wanted to recreate the STO universe on the desktop, on the table. So wow, I didn't even ponder that. And Jason, I'll have to go back and take a look, because what's nice is you've given us, and the team has given us the tools
Oh yeah.
to move into the 25th, or if we wanted to play the 32nd century and play along with it and use the tools that are in Utopia and all that to create material as we see fit, you know. So that's the cool part. But you know, for Jason and I, we have our Pathfinder class science ship. Jason was just giddy that I'd said that I'd be willing to play a science vessel.
Awesome.
And
yeah.
And I even picked the name out, Jace. I even picked the name out.
Yeah, because I'm GMing, so Brad got to pick. It's setting up well. There's several places to go with this, and I'm not sure we should. We'll see what happens. Brad has recently introduced me to the show Letterkenny.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen this.
If you haven't seen it,
it's a comedy series, right?
It's a Canadian comedy series.
Canadian comedy series, and what little I know of it is the meme character with the really thick glasses, right? I think I've seen clips of it on YouTube, but I have not had a chance to actually watch.
Brad's been watching. I've watched clips. And I will say it's do not watch with your son.
No.
I won't watch with my teenagers just because of the language, but it's
Sure.
laugh out
Well,
loud.
really,
but I bring this up because you named your character after one of the characters.
Well, I played off of the name.
Yeah,
I played off of the name.
Yeah,
but yeah, it really just to move past Letterkenny. What's interesting about it is it's they spin it as backwoods country Canada, but the politics and
really
the mindset is so progressive.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's such a dichotomy that it's
funny.
just it's laugh out loud funny.
Yeah. Nice.
But yeah, I used there's a character on there named Squirrely Dan, and so my character's name is Dan Squirrels.
Yeah.
Oh,
and we have the USS Superior Trail because Jason and I we are. You're a hiker. I'm a former hiker.
Yeah,
so,
hike the trail. But then we realized that means that Brad's also playing Lieutenant Dan, and you're going to suffer for that. You're going to suffer for that every time we get online for that.
Oh my God.
I didn't even think of that. I really didn't. But using that character tool, like I said before,
that was slick.
It was slick. And originally, I'm more of the type that want to write it on paper.
Yeah.
I like the rolling of the dice and the analog component to it. You know, you have your nice pen that you use, but I just couldn't get past how quickly it was and how neat it was to be able to do that online and then use the books as reference materials.
Yeah.
So yeah, kudos on that.
Speaking of books, I will say on behalf of the entire fan base, and I'm not, enabled to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Please, please, please come out as quickly as possible with the Picard book or something for the 25th century, because my God, do we want to play there? There's, like you said, there's so much there. But I am curious, and I guess I'm assuming you're going to say no, you don't. But then maybe we've asked you this before, but it seems that the writers, but especially the showrunners and other adjacent producers on some of these shows are more accessible and public about the machinations of these shows than we ever saw before, right? That you see some of the layers of the onion. Assuming you'd even want that access, do you or your writers even do you ever have access to some of those people just to pick their brains? Like, hey, what do you think about, like you said with Picard, like I would like to know what's going on with the Cardassians post-Union. I'd like to know what's happened to Moogie being in charge of the Ferengi Alliance, right? These are questions, and some of these people have clearly thought about this, and it doesn't make it into the shows. And just from a sheer writing standpoint, I'm curious if there's ever even the potential of access to pick brains.
There probably is. I think out of my personal respect to them being busy, I just don't want to be a fanboy and just pepper them with questions. That being said, though, a lot of the producers and design team on Picard especially are already very accessible on like social media and Twitter in particular, to the extent that like the showrunner Terry Matalas was posting a lot on social media during the run of Picard season 3, and was very open with answering questions and asking fan stuff, and doing just a ton of interviews. Of course, that's what you got to do when you're the showrunner. You got to do a lot of interviews. And he dropped a lot of stuff on social media. I mean, there was just so much stuff on social media that I even couldn't keep track of it all.
Yeah.
But I know that like Mike McMahon posts a lot of stuff about Lower Decks. Aaron Watke posts a lot of stuff. The producers of Prodigy have posted stuff from time to time. So like you can poke them on Twitter, and as long as you're professional and respectful, they'll give you a little back and forth without breaking too many surprises, because obviously they don't want to give stuff away that they're working on. But I think in general, like I've just avoided wanting to reach out for that level of detail because A, I don't want to be spoiled, and B, it'll come in time. Like it's not gonna, like we already know working on the RPG that like everything that we write could be completely deemed irrelevant if they decide to change it in a TV show or something. They could make all the Packlids disappear in a heartbeat and say it was just somebody's fever dream. And then I look at the book and I'm like, oh man, we wrote so much cool content about the Packlid. Like, oh well, you can't stop canon. That's funny. I think we could, but what we do have access though is we have access to Paramount's team and Paramount's Star Trek archive team, who are just the most fantastically amazing people in the universe. And when I reach out and say, hey, I just watched Picard season 3, and there were some absolutely fantastic graphics on screen of like these great galaxy maps and these great ship schematics and stuff. Like, could you ask the production team if they could maybe send some high-res images our way? That's like, cool. Are we allowed to get access to that stuff? And then like a week later, I'll get this big art dump on Dropbox, and they'll say, "Yeah, here you go. Here's the stuff we could throw together." It's like, cool. That's awesome. Like my I get the Roger Rabbit, the giant eyes, cartoon eyes. It's like, oh my god, what did you just send me? And it's just amazing stuff. And then I can send that to our graphics team and say, look, can you find a way to fit this into the layouts, or just even use it as design inspiration or something? And so we do have access to like cool stuff like that. But that's a very long-winded answer to your question. That
it's just fascinating.
We try not to get into the weeds about like, oh, well, what's going on Cardassia, or what's going on Romulus or whatever, and because I don't think they know, and I don't think they would know until they actually get into production of a show and decide, oh, like 32nd century Discovery, where the hell are their Klingons? Where are they? It's like they'll either say, oh, well, we can't tell you yet because you're going to find out, or they'll say, well, we're not going to tell you yet but you'll find out because we have no idea. We haven't even thought of it, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
It's like, oh, you don't even know? Damn. And then, from my standpoint anyway, it's like, well, Game Master, here's the tools. Go make it up. What are other Klingons up to? You tell us. It's your game. It's your story. Like, go be bold, be brave, and do something amazing with it. Like, it looks like what I just told you guys about the 25th century. Like, there are so many plot threads that you can pull on. Not to even mention the ones that you can dream up on your own, because it's all there, right? It's Star Trek, and it's like there's no shortage of stuff that we can do, and it's an exciting. That in particular is an exciting canvas because it's so open ended. Because like literally, you could do anything, right? Like even if you get into the whole political spectrum of like, okay, Romulus is gone. What happens to the Romulans? You could run a whole Romulan campaign. Even without withstanding the Zodbosh and the XBs and everything that happened with Picard and all that stuff. Yeah. But like the whole Romulan Reman thing, what happened with the Romulans and the Remans once Romulus got blown up after the supernova? Where are the Klingons? What are the Klingons up to post-war? Are they still friends with the Federation? Are they kind of tired with the Federation? Star Trek Online, I think, did a storyline where the Klingons weren't allies with the Federation anymore. And I don't remember how that all worked out, but there was some tension there. How's this whole Borg thing shake out? It feels like the Borg might be kind of done now, but maybe not. Who knows, right? Maybe something slipped out. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do with it, and I think now it feels like the 25th century is a fertile ground for storytelling in ways that we haven't seen in a while. Of course, that being said, there's still pockets of canon that haven't really been touched yet, right? Like between Enterprise and Strange New Worlds, that's pretty open. Like that whole Romulan War thing that didn't happen, that's pretty open. The whole movie era, like between the end of Star Trek 6
Yep.
and the start of Next Generation, like that whole Lost era thing, that's all pretty much open season. And then 25th century all the way out to the 32nd century, that's all a blank slate, pretty much. So there's great, of course, even in any era of play, you can still do your own stories and have a perfectly satisfying game, even though you know what canonically. But like what you were saying, Brad, like if you say, let's screw canon, let's just do our own thing, then sure, why not? Maybe you get into the whole endless what ifs, right? What if the Klingon civil war didn't happen, or what if Gowron didn't rise to power? What if Duras rose to power? What does that mean? And then you can just what if and extrapolate from there and go off and running. So that's the nice thing about Star Trek, is that we've got a gigantic timeline to play with, and we can do literally anything we want, which is kind of cool.
We have the tools. Again, I keep going back to it. We have the tools to do it.
Well, and I think a bunch of those tools are what you and your team have done with STA. I mean, the core rulebook is beautiful, but I think of like the GM guide and the player's guide. I mean, that's just good reading. That's just beautiful writing. That's just like stuff like there's something dumb, but it sticks with me. Like, and maybe I've mentioned this before to you, I don't know, but like when you guys actually get into the nitty gritty of like, this is what Starfleet Academy is, and and these are my words, but like this is basically the Caltech of the future, right? And that's that's my lens. But it's like, well, that's what was always intimated, but like outside of like novels or whatever, which aren't canon, this was never put into words. And we treat STA as soft canon, like you said. This is legit until they tell us otherwise. But that level of development that you provide, it's just like the little bit you've been sharing online, those sheets from the proofs for the Lower Decks book. It's like what you were mentioning earlier. First of all, I was just delighted to see the Packlets. I mean, that so could have been ignored, but I mean it because it's like, look at the level of detail that's going into this, and like things like you said about like a day in the life of kind of stuff, and you had hinted at that in one of those photos, and it's like, this is the stuff that goes deep, that does allow players or just Trek fans to further immerse in a world, because here's some stuff to think about that's not tied to like this adventure or this episode or this plot. I just think that's exceptionally cool.
Yeah. And again, it all goes back to what I was saying about how we obviously my imperative for every writer is like, okay, you're working on this book, find ways to pack it full of as many tools as you possibly can, plot hooks, tools, ideas, throw all that on the page so that game masters and players can grab literally any sentence out of any book and find something to do with it, find something amazing to do with it.
Cool.
And adding all that level of detail is, I mean, obviously it's super geekery to do this, but it just adds all that texture and content. Like I'm looking at, I'll tease this a little bit. So this is chapter 2, right? This is the table of contents for chapter 2, which is all about Starfleet support operations. Like who the hell's going to write a book about Starfleet support operations? Well, you know what? We are. And so this chapter goes into detail about,
even the font is right.
This is a riff. There's that one episode where they were doing like the movie version of Lower Decks. You saw the dramatic 80s tiles, and so we went with that for the chapter heads.
Gorgeous.
But so this chapter covers so the Cerritos and the California class ships are all about support operations. So like you got the frontline ships like the Enterprise doing all the cool first contact stuff. But then who are the schlubs who have to come in behind them to pick up the pieces and do all the politicking and all the diplomacy and the second contacts and the third contacts and like to get everything working? Like they're the bureaucracy that comes in, right, to make everything function. And so like, how does all that work? They don't really explore it on the TV show or the IP all that much, but we do. So we got tons of information in here about support operations. We go into detail about like what's life like as a lower decker. In the subchapter is called swabbing the decks. Like, what are you expected to do on a day-to-day basis? You're doing the scut work, you're doing the necessary scut work to keep the ship working so that the senior staff has a ship that functions to go do the important stuff.
Yeah.
We talk about reassignments and transfers. So like, obviously as a young officer, you're going to be probably expected to transfer from place to place because your career will grow and you will get to a point where you're on a ship and your career aspirations, there's nowhere for you to go, so you need to transfer to a different ship where you might get reassigned. Maybe you have a particular skill set that your ship is not actively supporting, so they're going to transfer you, or maybe you will ask for a reassignment. So like, how does all that work in a game? How does that work if you're a character? That's worth knowing.
Yeah.
So we drop that kind of stuff in, and like, you won't see that in too many other RPGs because it's such a niche thing. We do talk about promotion as a punishment. We threw a sidebar in there because I just love
that is so cool.
We talk about career pathing. We talk about building your career in Starfleet.
It's really cool.
I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. One of the things I liked about this book, and this was intentional, partly because a couple of my writers really pushed me, but because I thought it made sense, is that we've kind of edged into the random table aspect of game mastering. Back into the classic 80s when I was D&D game master, like I really loved random tables, like random encounter tables, just random stuff to happen to help me with my game. And so we dropped in some random tables, and one of my favorites is mandatory bonding time. So if you need ideas for your lower deckers to find something to do, roll a d20 and grab one of these random mandatory bonding events off of here.
Oh my god! And
just as an example, holodeck theater. Like grab your costumes and go play on the holodeck in some sort of play or something. Klingon acid rocket concert. You'll see a Klingon acid rock concert, right? Yeah, bang it. And then the last one I thought was great was making the gross fun.
Oh my god, yes.
Grossest job on the ship and find a way to make it fun and interesting. That's a team building exercise.
I cannot wait to play this. Oh my god.
All this random goofy stuff that is probably going to happen in your game sessions anyway, because inevitably most of my D&D sessions devolved into Monty Python.
Yes.
And so now Star Trek has their Monty Python in lower decks, right? So you could, if you wanted to, you don't have to, but you could turn all of your Star Trek sessions into a lower decks, laugh fest where you're not laughing at the property, but you're laughing. You love it so much, you're laughing with it. And you come up with these absolutely outlandish things that still fit Star Trek, and it all comes good in the end. But you just have to do some ridiculous stuff in your game sessions you see on the screen. So just dropping in all kinds of tools like that. There's just tons more in the book. I mean, obviously, it's a 240-page book.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
We had to pack it with stuff beyond just what you saw on the screen. Like, sure, we could throw in literally every character, every ship, every planet, every creature that you saw on the screen, but that's a catalog. That's boring. Like, let's add more meat and cool stuff into it. And so I hope. I have to admit though, I think fans might be saturated because we've been banging out some really good books consistently for a while now, that I think they're still digesting the Game Master Guide and the Player Guide.
I don't agree, because what do you have? We
maybe
definitely
we should slow down.
Please don't slow down.
Now, for you and your team's health, for the sake of your health, if you need to slow down, great. If you're worried about us as the consumer, no slowdown needed.
I think we can sum it up as "Thank you, sir. May I have another?"
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I continue to serve it up. Yeah,
I am curious though on that note, from a logistics standpoint, from a writer, from an editor and write. I mean, you're the SDA showrunner. I know it's not staff per se, but these days, approximately how many writers do you have? And I realize they're kind of probably coming in and out sometimes, but how many writers do you have at this point around STA?
Well, I mean, gosh, that's hard to answer. Like, I
know that's not totally fair.
I've got like 20 writers that are fairly prolific in terms of like how often they're, and part of it's because they're really good at what they do. Yeah. They're fast, they're accurate, and they're easy to edit, right? The easier they are to edit, then I mean, obviously, just by the nature of the work, I'm going to give them more work because that's less work for me, right? Like if they can get the formatting right, they can get the writing right, and there's like their manuscripts are like 90% there when they give me the draft. I'm like, this is going to be easy to edit, as opposed to the folks that are maybe newer. It's like, okay, this is going to take a little bit more work, and that's fine. So I've got probably 20 to 25 writers that are consistently in the churn, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but like consistently delivering work. And then because I am really intentional about bringing new voices in and getting that diversity and inclusion that Star Trek is so important. I've probably got another 30 or 40 writers that are doing one-offs, like they're doing a mission brief pack, or they're doing a standalone, or some of them were like brand new to writing or brand new to the industry. They may want to just get their feet wet and maybe just write some sidebars, right? So
interesting.
Do a 200 words worth of sidebars, and I'll just throw them into the book, and or find a place. It's a really low risk assignment, really. For me, because like if they completely botch it, then I'm only out a couple hundred words, and I can go find someone else to bang that out. But it gives them an opportunity, and it gives them that first professional credit, and then they can do it with it as they can either say, oh, you know what, I got my stuff into a Star Trek book, I'm done, I'm happy, or they can say, well, this could be a stepping stone to something more. And as an editor, I'm not just the project manager, I'm also the editor, so I'm also like an acquisitions editor in a kind of a way, where I'm giving people opportunities to pitch and to get commissions and stuff. So I think there's probably 60 or 70 writers in total, like in my orbit.
That's
and then I've got a cadre of editors and proofreaders, because there's just too much work for me to do by myself anymore.
Oh my God.
I can't do it.
Are you still doing copy editing?
Yeah, I copy edit the big books.
Oh my God. Okay.
It's not so much because I don't want to let go of it. It's because, creatively, I've got a specific vision for the line and for each book.
Sure.
And also as a freelancer, I've got the time, right? I got the ability and the time to focus on it, to pull it all together, get it approved by Paramount, and then put the finishing touches on it. And then Ariel, the graphic design or the art director, he manages most of the artistic side of things. Taking my design briefs and my non-artistic ideas, and then pulling them together. And then we work together with the graphic designers to actually turn it to go from a Word document into something that looks like this, right? I mean, that's
incredible. Yeah.
And it's really hard sometimes to like translate what's in our heads into text so that a graphic designer can understand it and then go off and do their amazing work. So that's a learning curve that we had to navigate and worked out. So yeah, I mean, I think I've probably got, between the graphic designers, the freelancers, and the staff, and the editors and proofreaders and the writers, that's close to 100 people. And then that's
incredible.
And then the artists, like, I don't even touch the artists, right? Like Ariel is completely in charge of that group of people, and he's got at least 30 different freelancers that he touches, either for one piece or for series. Like we try to give artists like blocks of work, like do 3 commissions or 5 commissions, because making art takes just as much time as, if not more, than to write a manuscript. And so yeah, I mean, a lot of people involved in the whole SCA thing, but in terms of like actual getting stuff done, like I'm the primary belly button for all of it. I mean, I guess as the project manager.
With the art team that you were talking about, isn't just specific to STA. They are dealing with art from the other game lines as well, or do you kind of have a group that's really kind of focused on STA?
So Ariel is my art director for Star Trek Adventures, but he's also the art director for a couple of our lines in the company. I think Dune and maybe one other one. I don't remember.
Okay.
So he's got a lot of work on his plate, of which Star Trek is a portion of it. But that is one of his focuses, which is great for me, because that means that's just one less hat that I have to wear.
Right.
Yeah.
And which is good. But then the artists, I mean, they're freelancers, right? So they'll work whatever work is available that interests them and that they're passionate about. And if Ariel goes to them and says, "Hey, I've got 3 commissions for Star Trek that need to be done. Are you interested?" And then 3 weeks later, he might say, "Hey, I got 2 pieces for Dune that needs to be done. Do you want to do them?"
That's cool.
And so like he's got this revolving door of freelancers, just like I do for writing. So yeah, it takes a family, right? It takes a family of people to get all this stuff done, and it's all these different pieces. Like I'm project managing the whole thing, but I'm also kind of managing the writer stable. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's just the writer's room, I guess I should say, would be the more appropriate.
But truly,
he's managing the artist in the same respect.
But to the notion of the writer's room, that I mean, it's, and you've mentioned this before, but maybe not so clearly as this time. I think it's neat how how reminiscent it is of, back in TOS and even TNG and some of the other shows, of just the openness to new input, right? The openness that because I mean, we know this about you. You've told us this repeatedly on and offline, that you're always looking for writers, and that's something that's been a Trek staple from the beginning, right? And I just think that's really cool. Especially, it's just cool, especially right now. Like, again, we're recording well in advance, because we're a few weeks we're a few weeks before this episode drops, and that was very intentional because it coincides very approximately with the pre-release for the Lower Decks book. But as we're recording, the WGA strike just started up, and so this to me, right, it's still one world. This to me is very relevant, given right. I mean, it's, yes, you're writing for a different purpose, but nonetheless, just the fact that you have this large quote unquote staff who are necessarily freelancers, right? And these are that's the world we live in. Even around this brilliant creativity, whether it's on the page in an STA book, whether it's on the screen in a Star Trek content, it's just very, very relevant. And so I think it's neat that there's still, I think it's really important that you are so open. That, I mean, of course, you've got the stable of writers, as you said, and like, obviously, because like the same names keep popping up through a lot of these products because they do so well. But it's so cool that there's still that receptivity, given the difficulties just very, very broadly around this whole industry and the adjacent industries, because it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to say? I really value the collaborative nature, and I think again, I was always inspired by the writing rooms that Star Trek that we knew and loved. Growing up, when I was reading the writers' guides and just reading the interviews and the making of Deep Space Nine by the Judy Garfield Reeves student, that is like that's my Bible.
Thank you, because when we talked to you last time, we went out and bought that thing, read it cover to cover, and you were not overstating it.
Yeah, it is so good, and like that concept has always stuck with me. I mean, even way back in the dark ages when my co-GM and I were running our own Star Trek homebrew. Like, we didn't like any of the systems that were out at the time, so we just made up our own system and just did kind of like a narrative heavy game and just called it good. But like, we had that concept in our heads, like, we're the directors, but we're also co-writers, we're co-producers, we're building these series together creatively and collaboratively. And even sometimes the players would get involved too, even though they were really more of the type of player who's just happy to show up and play, which is fine, right? Like, you got to have players like that. But like, he and I were like simpatico. We're like, we are going to build this thing. Like, we're the Rick Berman and Michael Piller of this series, and we're doing this thing just like they did it, and it just worked really, really well. And when I kind of stumbled into this role on Star Trek Adventures, I was like, I really want to do that, and it just doesn't. For a while there, it just didn't quite fit because there wasn't another staff member that was that level of who had the time and the passion to do it. And I was like, well, I got these writers, and so over time, like the first couple of books I did a really detailed outline with really specific word counts and really, really got into the weeds into it, and then handed it off to them and had them basically write to the assignments, right? Which was good, but I really felt that was kind of constraining, right? And so what I started to do is I started to experiment and said, okay, I'm going to put this outline together for this for like this crew pack or whatever. And but I want your feedback. I invited the 4 writers I wanted involved in it. And I said, okay, here's my notional outline. You all know the franchise and the series just as well as I do, if not better. So like, help me out, right? Help. Like, what details am I missing? What other nuances can we add? What other things from that totality of that season or that series can we add in here to make this even more robust? Given we have a page count and we have a word count constraints that we can only hit to a certain point, and like your overall assignments are only gonna be like 4,000 words each or whatever. But within those constraints, like, go crazy and go take the outline and go run with it, and kind of lead them to be collaborative and creative with me, and bounce back and forth on email or bounce back and forth on chat or whatever. And I've discovered that the more I do that, the better the products are in terms of like a cohesive, like collaborative thing. And I think I enjoy that more than just like dictating to somebody, I want you to write 1,000 words on the Klingon Empire, or I want you to write 2,000 words on Pac-led mating routines or something. And it's better when you get the writers involved in the outline early on, because they get bought into it. And when they see that I'm flexible and or even like in the middle of a draft, somebody will say, "Oh, you know what? I think we really need this NPC in here." And I'd be like, "Well, yeah, if we can fit within work count, go write it. Yeah, go crazy." Cool. And that makes sense. Or they'll say, "Oh, hey, Jim, I think you missed this. I think we really should have a sidebar about what does colon really mean to Vulcans." It's like, "Oh yeah, we should probably go into some detail on that." And then they'll write it, and I'll just drop it into the draft and whatever. So I've really embraced the collaborative nature, and I think that just ties right into Star Trek, right? The whole teamwork and team building, and we're stronger as a team as opposed to a bunch of individual parts or whatever, right? So
you're not micromanaging. You're in effect you're turning them loose to empower their creativity.
I am, yeah, absolutely. Because I think the end result speaks for itself. I think the Discovery book and the Shackleton book and Utopia Planitia were all very collaborative on the back end. And under the back end, under the hood, however you want to call it. And I think that elevates the product. And anything I can do to elevate the product, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is going to be a win for fans. So yeah, hopefully the fans see it.
Let me ask a question about because I think you've kind of, and again, I don't want to. I find this fascinating. I know there are a lot of folks out there that are work in the tech world that are, you and I come from project management background and continue to do it. They had, Modiphius at one point had PM jobs listed online, but I don't think people necessarily understand, just listening to you talk and having us talked over time and knowing you, that it's not straight PM work. You're not just running in Microsoft Project and drafting timelines and things like that. This is a different type of PM work where you're really multifaceted, just by the nature of the IP that you are caretaking. So I just found it because when I saw the post, I was like, and it may have been for something different, but I'm like, I know what someone who's doing that does, and I'm like, ouch, because I think you carry in the equivalent of like 4.5 FTEs worth of work in your briefcase or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I'm a bean counter's dream, because I can wear four different hats. I can just put hats from time to time, and you don't have to pay extra benefits or extra time off and that kind of stuff.
High output, low labor cost, right?
Exactly. But no, you're right, and I think I am an oddball beast in that not only am I the project manager, but I'm also the line editor, right? So that's 2 full-time jobs in and of itself, and I'm somehow managing to get all that done to varying degrees of success, I would think. But I think that helps. Again, not patting myself on the back. I think that helps to create stronger products, because not only am I doing the sausage making in terms of like the bells and whistles and the schedules and the invoices and the contracts and the endless emails, but like all of that ties into the line editing and making the each product more coherent and complete and tied into each other and bringing the teams together. And I mean, ultimately any project's going to live or die on the team, right? The personalities that you bring in, can they work with each other? Are there egos involved, et cetera, et cetera? And you get all that worked out, and then you got a high functioning team that is performing well and can do stuff, without asking, right? Like if, not that I push them with timelines or anything, but like certain individuals on my team deliver drafts within a couple of weeks of me giving them an assignment, to the point where they are so fast that I don't even look at their stuff for up to a month, because it's like, you're too fast. I can't even look at your stuff, because I'm working on 3 other things that are going to come up before this, and which I'm grateful that they're so speedy and efficient, but it's like it's almost too efficient. But yeah, it's just, you make it all work, and I don't know where I'm going with this. But,
I sent you off on a tangent. It was more of a
this is interesting.
Fascination.
Well, but this is, I mean, it's interesting, talking about the sausage making with you, especially because this is such such a unique thing, building these RPGs and all this. So I do have a question, because this is really dumb and it's in the weeds, but I've been going through the books, and this keeps coming up to me. So, not like you, but I write a fair amount in a totally different world, but a lot of the writing I do is collaborative, right?
And boring.
Well, that is a defensible argument, but still, but still, and so, like, thank God for Google Docs and whatnot. Okay, but when the stuff that I'm writing, it is more or less linear. Okay, there isn't layout, right? And then I look at, well, like, we look at that beautiful thing of the Lower Decks campaign guide. Okay, there's so much layout, and it is so core. It's fundamental to all of these books, right? It's got to not just be written well, but the layout has to be beautiful. It has to make sense. It has to look track, and it has to be readable. And so, from a writer standpoint, and I know this is really dumb and basic, but we're making a sausage here. So I'm curious. You're like, you see everything, obviously, right? That's not supposed to sound as nefarious as it probably did, but right, you see everything, but you're writers. So, like, when you're in draft stage, is there any layout, or all these, or is there just this plethora of documents for these separate pieces? Like, I know how I write what I write, and I know I'm very super intentional about everything, because otherwise we get lost. Especially, I mean, it's a book. My God, 240 pages. I mean, there's so much there. But how do you, behind the scenes, I mean, especially because you're juggling so many writers giving input on this, what does it look like to you in the process? What does it look like to them? Does that even make sense?
Yeah. So I think every project begins with an outline, right?
Yep,
whether it's a high level outline, or it's a really detailed outline where I say, this project is going to have 8 chapters. Here's the 8 chapters. Here's the titles of the chapters. Here's what I think some of the sub chapters should be. And then, I'll do bullet points. This chapter should cover this, and this, and this, and this. Maybe a sidebar about this would be really cool. Maybe a NPC here or there or whatever. And then I send that outline to the entire team on that book, whoever's agreed to work on that book, or whoever's available and willing to work on it. I'll send them that entire outline, and at this point, it's on our Google Drive, so it's a shared document, and they can go in there and they can pick at it. They can, if they don't already have assignments, maybe somebody will say, "Oh, I'm really passionate about talking about that element of what do you do when your senior officer dies and then comes back unexpectedly? Like, what do you do about that? The whole Shax thing, right?" And someone says, "Oh, I'm really passionate about that. Can I write that little section or whatever?" And they all have their word count constraints that they've been contracted to work at, but then we just take that outline and we divide it up, and they go off and write. So they all see the outline, so they all have the broad strokes of what the book will look like when it's all said and done. But that's really just a starting point, because what happens then is they all go off and they all write their sections. And I am confident that a lot of them, because a lot of them are friends with each other and are either professionally or just socially, but like, I'm confident that they are talking to each other without looping me in. And of course, they don't have to loop me in, but I'm sure they're sharing drafts sometimes, or they're bouncing ideas off of each other, and then they're going up and writing their drafts. And then at some point, they start sending me all their inputs. And so I'll get, this subchapter and that subchapter and this chunk of text and that chunk of text. And I'll start compiling all that stuff together into the chapter. So each chapter, whether it's a 20-page chapter or a 100-page chapter or whatever, I'll start pulling those all together into the template that I have, the Word document template, which has the headers and the footers and the sidebar layouts, so that our graphic designer can take that Word document and turn it into InDesign. So I'm the one who sees all the pieces come together, and then once everything's together, I'll do a top-down edit of it, really detailed, getting into the weeds, track changes, all that stuff. If there's time, I'll send that compiled draft out to the writers and say, okay, here's the places that you need to tweak or fix or whatever. And then they'll do that, and then send it, and then they'll start seeing pieces of it coming together. But once I've got the whole book, in full format, and I've done my top-down edit, I've gotten all the revisions from the writers. That goes off to the proofreader. The proofreader is pretty much the second person who sees it in totality, right? I'm the first person to see it in totality, and then the proofreader sees it in totality. I'll clean it up after that point, and then it goes off to Paramount for approval.
Right.
And at that point, like none of the writers have seen all of it, right? Because it's just not. They don't need to. I mean, on the rare occasion, somebody will say, "Oh, can you send me? I'm really curious about the book. I want to see it," and
cool.
maybe I'll send it to them. But for the most part, it's we're just off and running. They're off and running to the next thing, right? So they're moving on to the next project, and they've done their part on that project. I'm still responsible for pulling it together, but they don't. Most of the time, I'd say probably 95% of the time, they don't see the full product until I send them the comp PDF. And then they finally get their comp, print copy or whatever.
Right.
And then they're like, ooh, then they get to see the whole thing because it's such a long process. I mean, to do one of these books, it's usually a year, if not longer, in terms of like going from outline to final book in hand. Is a year at a minimum. The PDF releases are much faster, obviously, because we don't have to deal with production and distribution and stuff. But yeah, so that's just an element of the sausage making, is that we start with the outline. The outline gets either super detailed or kind of nebulous depending on the project and the size of the project. The writers write their bits, I get the bits, put it all together, and then it goes on from there.
That makes sense.
Now, to the next level though, as a project manager, right, there's a schedule driving all that, right? Of course, like I've got only so much time to draft it. I've got so much time to edit. I got so much time to proofread. It goes into approvals. Paramount has a contracted time they're supposed to get their stuff reviewed. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer, just based on their time frame. Because the review team at Paramount is super busy because they have to approve everything Star Trek, not just our stuff, but like everything, like the books, the T-shirts, the novels, the tchotchkes, the cutters, the everything Star Trek has to.
The Legos or the blue bricks.
The blue bricks, yeah, exactly. Everything.
Seriously,
And so we're just one of hundreds of licensees, right?
My God.
We just happen to be labor intensive because we drop 200,000 word manuscripts on them that they have to then read, and reading isn't quick, right? You have to take time to go through it.
Jeez.
Anyway, so that project management perspective, we got the whole Gantt chart and the schedule and all that stuff that we do on the software that we have to deal with. And then
can I ask real quick, what do you use?
Sure.
Is it proprietary internal, or do you use like Asana or Monday or something like that?
We use Monday.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we use Monday for overall good. Like I think that we're still learning. Like Monday is supercharged, super powerful, and I don't know that we're necessarily using it to its full potential. But the way we're using it is enough. Right? We're making it work for what it is. Or for what we can do with it. We can certainly do more if we have the bandwidth to really truly learn it. But it gets the job done, and I can do the flow charts, and I can see the schedule, and that's enough for me. Like as long as I can see where I am on each project, and I've got my project board, and I can see all 50 projects on there. And
you don't exist to use the tool. The tool exists for you to do the job. That's always the funny part. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so we've made the tool work for what we needed to do, and we can add little tweaks to it as needed. But the fact that I can look at it at a glance and see the status of all my stuff, and I can change the status as needed so that the senior team can look at it and go, oh yeah, looks like everything's on track, or I can raise a red flag if I need to or whatever. But so that gets done. Of course, project management, for those who want to get into it, not just for RPGs, but just in general, it's an endless amount of email. Like I think I gotta send at least 150 emails a day. And I'm probably getting his money back, and that's daily. I mean, sometimes it's like piddly stuff, right? It's a writer saying, "How did we decide to spell Katinga again? Is it 2 apostrophes or 1 apostrophe? Is it italics? Is it not italics?" Or then an editor will say, "Hey, there's a typo in the style guide. Can you fix that?" It's like, "Sure, I'll fix that." So it's like sometimes it's big ticket item emails that like really need some focus. And then otherwise it's just like, not to say piddly stuff, but it's low impact, low difficulty type of stuff that is quick to answer. But if you have 100 quick to answer emails every day, it takes time. That's just time.
That's time.
So it's project management is just a ton of email, a ton of cat herding, and then somewhere in there you get to do fun stuff sometimes, depending on the project. If you like the project anyway.
It's funny because Jason we do some operational stuff and how we store these these
Oh yeah,
obviously these Zoom file
Yeah.
management and I have storage and he doesn't, so we do some transfers and he's like, hey, can you do some transfers when you have a minute? I said to him, I go, shoot me an email because I treat emails like tasks and I organize that way.
So I warned him I was going to send him a series of inappropriate emails that he would be obliged to complete his tasks, but we'll see how that goes.
We project managers know how to put anything in the dumpster too if it's called scope creep. And let's be honest, most everything that Jason sends me is scope creep, time creep, or he's just playing.
That is fair. Yeah. After the Lower Decks book comes out, or at whatever point that it's off your hands, right? Like you that doesn't mean you're not going to be worrying about it, watching it, but when your work is done and it moves off to the next step, do you get any downtime? Is there any respite before the next big? I know you've got tons of projects, but is there going to be are you going to have a chance to actually like slow down for a little bit?
Nope.
That's easy.
there is no rest. I have been they made me the project manager in 2019, right after Gen Con, because it was the last day of Gen Con. I was like, hey, I've been working really hard at this for a couple of years now with you guys as a writer and an editor and kind of like the backup to the project manager. And we knew at the time that the project manager wanted to move on to bigger and better things within the company. Yeah. And I was like, I think you got a potential gap coming up. I think I can get that job done. And they're like, okay. And I think Sam, the former project manager, had already primed the pump. And so they're like, okay, go do it. And if you fail, then you fail. But I think since August 2019, I have been full speed on project after project after project, whether it's it's everything. The Klingon core rulebook was the first big one, and then right after the Klingon core book, it was Shackleton, and then after Shackleton, it was just one thing after another after another. So I have a constant stream of projects that I'm working on. Earlier this year, last year we were working on a bunch of stuff that came out last year, and then we were working on three big print releases for this year. And just through the nature of the schedule wonkiness and just all the challenges that are involved in project management and like getting stuff done, all three of those projects kind of came up about the same time-ish, around October, November-ish. So I had just a ton of work on my plate, but and that's when I got the runabout, and I said, I am not going to do this runabout until these three big projects are off my plate. Now I knew there would be other projects to come to replace them, but not quite to the compressed time and intensity that was involved. And so Lower Decks was the first one. That's finally done and completely. Once I hand off once we hand off the files to the printer, like I'm pretty much done. Like I'm just like, okay, just let me know when it gets to the warehouse and let me know when it gets to America, because then I can get on social media. But like once I've gotten the designer to deliver the print files to the printer, like I'm done. Like there's not much about the only thing that's left for me to do is to angst over global distribution and printing, because of course there's nothing I can do at that point. No. I'm not going to go fly out and get the crate and bring it to America, because that's not my wheelhouse. But so
Jim's on the boat carrying it over.
So we had Lower Decks, big project number 2 and big project number 3, all in the same kind of wavelength. Big project number 2 is now off to the printer, so that is pretty much off my plate now as well. And then big project number 3 just started layout. So that's fun. That's fun and exciting, because like the manuscript part of it is done, and that was probably the hardest part. And now goes into layout, and the layout stage is fun for me, because this is where I get to see it turn into something other than a Word document. Because now project number 3, we've been working on that project for about a year, and all I've been staring at is Word documents for a year. And I, at this point, I mean, even well before this point, I'm sick to death of looking at Word documents. I am ready to see something else. And so now that the graphic designer has it, they can work their magic, start turning it into InDesign. They can start pulling in the art. They can pull in graphics. They can pull in all the design work. And then at some point, in probably a month or 6 weeks or something, they'll hand me a draft, or they'll contact me and say, okay, the draft PDF is up on the share drive. Go start checking it out. And that's where my mind will be blown, because
that's cool.
It happens every time. Like when I go from staring at a Word document to finally seeing something like this on the screen, with all the color, even if it's a rough draft,
Yeah.
And they have sections blocked out that they're not sure what they're doing with yet.
Right.
I can still see it actually becoming a real product. And it's like, oh, now I've got a whole different design angle to it. And it gets me all fired up again. But that's a constant cycle. Like I've always got new stuff in the hopper to start working on. So as one project goes away, there's already something else, to work on. And
when you talk big project, because sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
Zoom big. Independent of big projects, like you were talking about, that doesn't include stuff that you might be working on, like, or we're having folks work on, like mission briefs, character sheets, things like that. Those are separate work streams from whatever these big projects are, I'm assuming, without asking to give anything away. I just want,
Brad, you know project management, right? It's waterfall, right? It's like each discrete product, right? Every mission brief, every standalone adventure, every other digital product, every book is a separate project unto itself, with its own work stream and its own schedule and its own budget and its own team of freelancers and all that stuff. And so each of those individual projects are part of the overall Star Trek Adventures project. And so, and they're all running at different timelines, right? That like none of them are. I mean, it's all simultaneous, but like the Lower Decks book was done in the end of April. Big project number 2 is now in production and is off. But in the meantime, I was working on mission briefs and adventures and all this other stuff. And it's like it's just different levels of effort for different projects, and somehow it's just like I said earlier. Or I guess maybe last episode, depending on how you break this up. Today just happened to be a good day where I was doing a lot of Modiphius work, and I think I touched 14 of the projects that I've got on my plate in different levels. Right, I had to do a final edit on one. I had to do a final polish on one, and then submit it to the Paramount portal. I had to issue purchase orders for a third one, because I had 5 freelancers on it, and they each needed their own purchase order to invoice. And I guess that's an aspect of project management that we didn't touch on. So, in addition to those 150 emails a day, right, when you look at any given project, every person working on that project needs a purchase order and an invoice. And so like Lower Decks is an example. I had 10 writers on that, right?
Wow.
So I had 10 writers, 2 editors, a proofreader, a graphic designer, and 12 artists. I don't know, something like this. That's 40 people.
Jeez.
And so that's 40 invoices.
40.
Yeah.
That has to go into the system. And then I have to get those purchase orders, and I have to send out those purchase orders via email to each freelancer to say, hey, here's your invoice, or here's your purchase order, please invoice. And then those invoices come in drips and drabs, because of course everybody wants to be paid. Some people are faster at it than others, and then all those invoices have to get submitted. So there's that whole boring part of that boring but necessary part of project management is that people got to get paid, so you got to do the paperwork.
Well, I never think getting paid is boring. I will put that out there. But I do think, as someone who's not in project management, right? Like the most management I do around stuff like that is it's so much simpler. But it's truly interesting. There's an art and a science to all of this. And I obviously, we geek out about the writing and the art and the creativity, but this is an aspect, like you said, that is behind the scenes, but it's arguably equally important. And it is truly intriguing in its own right.
Yeah, the whole operational, that's overhead that I don't, and even me listening to you talk about it, you're editing books and you're doing all this other work. That's a lot of stuff that even I, with my background, don't ever necessarily even think about that you have to handle. So and like you said, each one is a project, whether it's a PDF only or whatever the case is. Right. So
okay, so then to check my understanding of this, so then big project number 2 you said is off to the printer.
Yep.
So then you're, again, other than the angst, you're done with that, right? That's where that hands over.
Yeah. The vast majority of my angst about that one is now behind me. And,
good. Okay.
For good or ill, because, like a lot of projects, like, at a certain point, you have to get it out the door, and you can't futz with it anymore. It's got to become a thing. And if it's got some warts in it, that's fine. Typos happen, little errors happen, but you try not to think about it. and you hope that it's as good as you can make it, and then you send it off into the world, and then inevitably the fans will say, "Oh, you got a typo on page 63, and you got this thing wrong on this page." It's like, that's okay. Congratulations, you found it. We left it there for you to find.
Yeah, well, but I mean, we've said this before. We've said this, talking to a lot of people on this podcast, that what you all put out, I mean, the Star Trek Adventures products are so well proofed. I mean, let's be honest. But it's gorgeous, and we've talked about this with some of the people who've worked with you. I mean, we're intrigued by a number of games, by a number of genres, and there's a spectrum. You know, you've got some super creative stuff out there that is just poorly proofread, right? It's inexcusable that there should be, right? You spend that much time on something. It shouldn't be like, I don't know if this says something good or bad about me. Actually, I'm pretty sure I know. But like when I read,
I'm pretty sure too.
Yeah, I'm sure. But like when I read, and almost everything I read is nonfiction, and so like when I read, I like take notice of how far into the book do I get before the first typo, right? And like if I can get a couple hundred pages, I'm like, well, that's incredible. But with a lot of the RPG material out there, you don't get a couple hundred pages in, right? Sure. But with what you guys put out, I mean, it's so clean. It just the errors are almost non-existent, which just kind of blows my mind, because I can't. I mean, well, copy editing sounds just abysmal in the best situation, but I can't imagine doing something like that with material like this because of its nature. That's a special skill. It's got to be.
Yeah. And, well, I'm gratified to hear you say that. So thank you very much for that. I'll give that to the team and make sure that you know that the work that we do is appreciated and noticed. So that's awesome. Yes. But yeah, copy editing is a skill unto itself, and fortunately, I've got that skill from my background and my professional career. Back in the day, I went to school and got a degree in English nonfiction writing and editing. So that was my professional direction, for good or ill. Like, who wants to do that for a living? But if you're detail oriented, like, that's where it is, right? And I've just got that ability to focus. I have, somewhere on the autism spectrum or ADHD or whatever, but like, the ability to hyper focus and cool. Find those little super detailed things is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
To where sometimes I can't read for pleasure sometimes because the typos smack me in the head and I can't get past it sometimes. But I've learned by working on Star Trek Adventures or working in this kind of environment, like, you have to let go at some point, and you can't, like, I do have a checklist. I have a checklist that I go through for every book, every product. It's like, did you check the headings? Did you check the footers? Did you check the subheadings? Did you check the end of every paragraph that ends with a period? You know, blah blah blah. Just all these little super tiny details.
Yes, but it matters.
Years doing this, and it's like, oh shit, I missed that. Page numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So once you are an editor and you work on that checklist, it's easier to do multiple passes through a PDF or through a Word document because you know what you're looking for. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, there's just a lot of detail. There are, and this is not going to surprise anybody who knows anything about putting a product or a project together. Is like, there are probably thousands of hours of effort behind the scenes that goes into making one of these books that literally nobody sees or has any concept of, unless they've gone into the weeds themselves on even a small project, or has worked in project management like you have, Brad. But Jason, I mean, you've got relevant.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
So like when a fan says, "Oh, you got a typo on page 63," it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm sure we do. I'm sure there's more. If you spend some time looking at that, I'm sure you'll find more. But if you think about a book, right, like a 240-page book, you're talking 140, 150,000 words.
Okay. And
then you think of that sheer number of words, how many punctuation marks are in that book? How many periods? How many commas? How many quotation marks? How many things? How many graphical textual elements are in that book? Every single one of which is the potential for a typo. So like, of all those hundreds of thousands of characters that are in a book, and then you add in the graphical elements and the headers and the footers and all that stuff. Like, if you have even a 1% error rate in a book, you're doing pretty great.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember what the latest percentage is in the professional world, but I think like professional nonfiction editing and writing and proofreading, I think the big houses shoot for like a 3 to 5% error rate, and they're big honking like 300, 500 page nonfiction books or something. 5% might be high, but even like a 3% error rate is like, if you're doing that, that's pretty freaking amazing.
Okay.
Given the amount of stuff that's in a book. And if I can, publish a 240 page RPG book that has like 1% error rate, that's a gold star for me.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, it is.
Like, there are no awards for good editing for RPG books. Like, nobody cares. Unless you're a fan.
I don't agree. I think the whole readership cares when you can read through something that's super clean and doesn't detract. That matters.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, as we wrap up here, thank you again, and thank the team for everything you all do. Yeah. Jason and I go back to this idea of RPG as lit and as literature, and all this material, Shackleton, Utopia. We read we haven't. We jokingly we've read the material tons. Now we're getting a chance finally to have some time to play.
Yep.
But we read it, and I have obviously the PDFs. We talk, when you guys all on occasion issue an errata. I have the errata docs. You guys are really good at PDFs, but really for all of us, especially now as we talk about this golden age of Trek Plus, having all this material and the tool sets for us to even play outside of what you've already provided. Thank you. And obviously I'm not going to ask you to come again, because you will. And because we're going to ask you, so we know you will. Jason's already working on the smoking jacket.
I am thinking of a smoking jacket. I have some ideas.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Yeah,
and Jason, it can't be one of those like you go to Amazon and get like the one you put on a poodle. This has got to be something,
I have. I'm not going to promise it's going to match Jim's hat.
Okay.
But it's gonna come with the requirement. We'll see you wearing this at the next con, right? But, yeah. But no, definitely number 5.
You might get number 3, because Jason, I'll be number 1 in the preview. You might get the number 3 Dice and Mind T-shirt.
Oh no, we're gonna send him something of value. Yeah.
Okay. Ouch. Ouch. Well, hey, thanks again. There's stuff that we haven't even talked about that we're going to have you back and talk about again. And it sounds to me like there will be things that we'll be hearing about, throughout the year and into 2024 that you'll have you come back for. So very excited for Lower Decks. You've already teased the idea that there's always that potential. We'll see that in Q3. But even we'll have the PDF ahead of time, so we'll be able to start playing,
and to watch the videos that you and Mike are going to put out about playing in Lower Decks, right? I think our listeners probably know, but continuing conversations, and I usually do podcasts, not YouTube, just because that I like that, but the stuff that you guys talk about, the people you talk to, the resources, it is just a phenomenal resource, both for play and just, I guess, play, but it's so useful. So looking forward to seeing those videos and getting helping to get the vibe of how this was imagined, so that we can play in a Lower Decks kind of style.
We are on podcast too. It's not just video, but I don't even remember where I think Studio Tembo is the one who managed it, and I think he's gotten us on all whatever.
You're everywhere,
You're everywhere,
yeah. I just like listening to the podcast.
Don't watch the videos, because who wants to watch us go on for an hour? You just listen to it, but
you guys can get away with it. Jason and I say this a million times. We have faces made for radio.
But it is funny though. Because you guys really do get excited. Especially Mike. He just looks perpetually enthused. So it is.
Michael's very excited. And we just get. It's like you guys. Even to a lower level, because you guys are finding ways to get just some really A-list talent on here to talk with you.
Lucky.
You guys just doing amazing work. Every time you do an episode, I'm so impressed.
Really appreciate that, Jim.
Like I said, why are you having me on when you got these other great people?
Oh, please, are you kidding?
But
one, we appreciate that, and two, don't undersell yourself.
No, we love talking to you.
Appreciate that. But just like as the Star Trek Adventures circle continues to expand, and we keep pulling people into our orbit, like Thomas Maroney and Jody Hauser and Jackson Lansing, and I've even got Dr. Aaron McDonald writing for me now. And Jesse Gender, people are out there writing for me.
Just have
of course
to
we're
say,
gonna get them on the show.
Everyone knows this, but
is that a teaser that you got? Because we've had her on the show.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah, and so I'm glad I didn't ask that question before. Erin is awesome. She is just a heck of a person. You are. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Oh my god.
Yeah. She will be. I mean, everyone that all this material is phenomenal. It'll be fascinating to see what comes from your collaboration with her. So we had it was a real treat to have her on the show.
This is Star Trek though, right? I mean, to your point, I mean, this pulls for this exactly, right? Yep. So cool to see you guys. Jim, thank you so much. It is just always a pleasure hanging out with you.
Yeah, Jason, Brad, thank you so much for everything you do for not just the industry, but for Star Trek and just in general. You guys are doing amazing work, so keep it up.
You know, I again can't thank Jim enough for taking the time with us. And even after we recorded this, I think Jim did his update. Was it out on Twitch or was it YouTube? We watched it, the update on the Star Trek system.
Yeah.
And even very graciously called us out there for a second.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I listen to it just because I get information from that, even with us having him on the show.
Hey, that makes Dyson Mind. That makes us STA canon, right?
Oh, sure. Okay, we'll go with it. Go with it, Jim. If you're listening to that, you can respond back and
Jim.
About that.
If any of your writers need an NPC, I would strongly recommend Brad's lieutenant, who's a science officer. We can talk more offline.
It's great. Yeah, because I think we've talked about it. I think we talked about this in another episode too, where there's a lot of references to a show that we watch called Letter.
Actually, okay. So I'm gonna just totally waylay us.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever had this thought, but I'm kind of just run this with me. How cool would it be? And I don't actually mean this rhetorical. I'm actually putting a question mark after this.
Okay.
Because our wives would be like, not at all.
No.
And please stop talking to us.
Or about us on the podcast.
Right. Oh, if they only knew.
Yeah.
That we keep telling people they have better judgment. But really, how cool would this be? Can you imagine there being an NPC in Star Trek Adventures with your name, like intentionally, like because of you, like there would be a Brad Brown as like an officer on one of the ships or whatever.
It'd be cool, but I can think of probably 99% of the population that would probably be better, further ahead in line than me for having one. But wouldn't it? But I get it. I get it.
God forbid they would actually be based on our real characteristics.
Oh God. We would be one of those characters that had we would have the red.
Yeah, someone grabs the sheet, they're like, well, wait, this can't be right.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna be the first NPC that gets killed off.
Yeah. So the whole cadre of red shirts. Okay, so
sorry, I didn't quite know how to react to that because normally when you
had a little bit of fear in your eyes, honestly.
I did because when you preface things the way you just did,
yes,
nothing good comes from that for me.
I think it would be well, it's like
so
like
I was
Riker,
a bit surprised. It was benign.
Fair enough.
It was benign.
It was benign. Yeah.
But I was not expecting that. I was fearful.
I mean, who wouldn't want to play Brad Brown?
I guess. I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. I don't have it in front of me, but I've told you, and I think I've mentioned on here, I play I'll roll dice for sports games.
Yeah.
There are a couple companies out there, for the very few of you that might be interested. There's one called Stratomatic. And Stratomatic, they create a card for each Major League Baseball player, with, in effect, a system on the card that if you rolled it, the stats for that player would be almost completely accurate to how they really played. So,
oh wow!
And I actually have a card made. I had a card made that was me, so I could play in that universe.
Okay.
So
I think it'll be awesome to have an NPC after me, but I can tell you which stats really could be improved upon.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest with you. If I were to, like, for the baseball game, you could guess that my stolen base count and my speed are probably not, like, top notch.
Even I run faster than you.
Yeah. Do you want to really talk about running?
Not elegantly.
Okay. And I would dispute, one, you're not elegant, and two, I could run faster than you. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I doubt it. And in fairness, that video you saw so many years ago, I was carrying a large tripod at the time.
No, you were not.
Oh, wasn't I?
No, and one,
that's
it wasn't a video I watched. It was the video I created.
Oh, that's
because
worse.
You and I were out.
I'm confabulating. I'm conflating two memories.
Yeah, you're.
Oh, yeah.
This was when we were in Phoenix.
Yeah, let us not talk of this further.
Yeah,
well, because I'm actually thinking of my Tucson trip, within like a year of it. That's why.
Oh yeah,
that's why.
It's
okay.
Different. Yeah, very different.
Oh, I remember now. Yes, let us not speak of this.
Yeah, we'll move. You brought it up, but we'll move on. I'll give you that. I'll give you a freebie.
Yeah, that's on me. So going back to Jim Johnson and Star Trek Adventures.
Sorry, that just we pretty much sullied this whole episode by completely going off on a weird tangent.
Right, Jim has got to stop slumming it.
But, yeah, pretty much. I will say though, and I mentioned this, I believe in the episode. I love reading the Star Trek, the Star Trek Adventures books, like books,
yes.
And I do that with a lot of material. I do that, I recently did it with the Spelljammer books for D&D that they just came out with more recently.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what I'm reading now in Jam Corner later. But first of all, Utopia Planitia, I love that book with all the starships and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And the carryovers and some of the bleeding in from STO and everything. And
the GM guide and the player's guide are, I think, exceptionally good literature.
Yes.
In the game. However, before we transition here to start to wrap the episode, I want to call out something that we've been really thinking strongly lately, as we've been moving through a couple of the published adventures for STA.
I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
And I say this because I've been GMing these first couple, right?
Yeah.
We did a duet with me GMing. He was a PC. We did what is it? A Star Beyond the Stars.
Yep.
A Star Beyond Stars. Sorry if I'm goofing that up.
Modified a bit.
Absolutely, we homebrewed a bit. Absolutely, wanted to bring it a little more in line with a few, not the plot at all, with a few of the nouns, if you will, with a few of the specifics that I thought would resonate more with you and your interest in Trek.
Yep.
And what stood out to me was just how well it was written, how much I enjoyed just reading through the adventure. And now we are playing Lurkers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first one, adventure published out by Modiphius for Lower Decks. And it's a totally different feel. And in its Lower Decks, and it's just as good of a read, not to mention a play.
And what's so interesting is all this material. Yes, there are people that write there are a lot of different people writing a lot of different material in the STA world. All of it, you go and read. I was rereading Shackleton recently. You read these mission briefs, and me, I'm a hoarder, and I think I have the whole library of all of them.
I think you might.
I think I might. PDFs, and I've printed some out.
Yep.
All of that is just the way they write them, the way that the way that all these people use the same kind of recipe.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own little indelible mark on it, but they're just it's fun to read them, independent of whether we game them or not.
They all feel like an actual episode of Trek.
Yeah.
And they all read like lit. So I 100% agree with you. They are worth reading on their own merit.
Before we jump over, isn't it funny though? You said something to me, because I don't remember what I actually was doing in the game at the time, but I think I don't know if I called out or if I don't remember. I was issuing an order because I was playing a lieutenant, but I was the leader of an away mission.
Yep.
And you said, "Wow, that you sounded just like you were on an episode of Trek."
Yeah, that was
I can't
pretty
remember.
cool.
I can't remember what it was.
Right, you didn't really. It's not what you said is so much. Yes, I remember the moment though. It was so in keeping with the story, and that was because the writing and the crafting of the story put you so much into it that you were just there, and it really flowed. I think if I recall, I stopped.
You did
the game for a moment. I'm like, you know what just happened? It's like that literally was, you were in it.
That's exactly what you did. And that still resonates. I cannot even remember what it was. I think it was literally I was hailing the ship, I think, or something like that.
Yes, it was not a mundane, it was a mundane thing. But it's like that has never happened for us before. Not with Pathfinder, D&D, not with anything, as much as we have loved some of these other games.
Yeah.
And part of it's probably just our deep familiarity with Trek, but still, that is the first time where I think either of us, not to mention both of us, felt like we were truly in world.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. So really looking forward to our next session. We'll get that on the calendar soon.
Why don't we now jump over to the GM corner, because I am curious. I talked a little bit last episode about what's been on my desk, and there's more to come on that. But you're in this period now where you have a little bit of extra time, as opposed to, and I say that comparatively compared to a school year.
Well, there's no comparatively about it. I have a ton of time right now. My classes, as we're recording, my classes don't start until the end of the week, and no one else is home. But I know
you are still writing. Let's be honest. I'm going to bring it up. The pre-order is out.
Yes,
now
yes, it is. Thank you.
For your book.
Yep.
And it's posted out on Twitter. Name of the book again?
Leadership in Star Trek: Lessons from the Captain's Chair. We'll post the link in the show notes.
Yes, by you and
Aaron Peterson, Dr. Aaron Peterson. Yep.
So that you're already working on. Am I spoiling it by saying you're working on another book?
We're deeply in. I mean, our editor doesn't know, but I'm fairly confident. Right, she doesn't listen. Although she's pretty geeky, and I like that. We are.
I bring that up because that's something you are working on.
We're 4 chapters into a second book. Yeah, and I spent the start of break writing daily again. Felt great. The second book is a much more difficult book to write than the first, because it's a totally different, still on Trek and leadership, but it's a totally different book. I got it to where I wanted it to go, and then I thought, okay, now I am going to take a month or 2 off from writing, from serious writing.
Yeah.
And just let things be. That's just where I can do that right now, and it's important to recharge.
Yeah. And so with you doing that, we've had some writing projects we've kind of just said we're going to play now, and we're going to take some of this other stuff and just temporarily set it aside. But there are some things that are on your desk that you haven't had time to put on your desk.
Well, and I have intentionally prohibited myself from thinking about writing in Star Trek for that reason. I want to take some time and some space, and I want to play. And like you had said to me on the phone the other night, just a day or 2 ago, maybe yesterday, we are going to be in so much better of a position to do this well.
Yes.
Because we're playing. I mean, duh. Now, speaking of playing for the GM Corner, so last night, as you know, I was reading through the Rules Digest, which I cannot recommend enough. Don't get me wrong. I think you still definitely should start with the core rule book. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's well worth the read. But the Rules Digest, I'm finding, is becoming indispensable. Now,
as a gamer, that is
as a gamer, as a GM.
Yep.
As a GM. Now, here's what stopped me though. They have a 1-page synopsis of the character creation process. And you had
I know
said
where you're
to
going to
me,
do this.
yep, I'm setting you up in a moment.
Yep.
I'll just wrap up on my bit here by saying, you had texted me like, I don't even know if it was today or yesterday.
It
but
was
you're
like 2 days ago.
Okay, 2 days ago. Okay,
Yeah,
so you planted the seed. Thanks. Of we still are 2 or 3 sessions away from being done with lurkers that I'm jamming for you, and you're like, I should work on generating my PC along the way so that when you finish playing through lurkers, we switch and we're just ready for you to GM the next adventure. And it's like, oh, that's a great idea. And so I thought, okay, so we have to get that on the calendar, obviously. But I was then flipping last night through the Rules Digest, and they had it as a page. Now, they go into detail, but I'd not seen it really before or read it before as a synopsis. And I'm reading it, and it's like, okay, I knew this was cool, and I remember doing this online with you for your character creation, but you were having some bandwidth issues, so you had to turn your monitor off.
Yeah.
So I read this list, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Now I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to ask you to wrap us up by asking, has character creation lately been on your mind, perchance?
Oh, you're such a smarty pants. Amongst other things. Yeah, so
those are the ones we can say on here.
Yeah, exactly. It's no secret that we are not like uber experts in the gaming world. That's why we have people on the show like Jim Johnson and Malcolm Shepard from Green Ronin and all these other folks that have been writers. And I could go for hours talking about all these folks that have been on who are pundits in the world and understand the world and that we don't, and we are still learning about daily. The reason I bring that up is because I've known about the game. We've talked about this in the past. Mongoose Publishing publishes a version of Traveler. And it's the second edition. It came out in 2016. They had a new version of the core rulebook come out in 2022. And I didn't know a ton about the gaming system. It was not something that was on my radar. I was familiar with it. I've wanted to get someone on to talk about it, like Mark Miller, who devised the original version of it. Awesome. But I don't remember the context in which I decided to.
Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden you just start texting me like traveler.
Yeah, and so I got into it, and that's because I got into looking at the character creation process. I think what it was that I was looking at this from multiple systems perspectives, and building a character in Traveler can in many ways be as much fun as an episode of playing the game itself. And
well said.
And there are so many great examples online. The most recent one I watched is the one from Glass Cannon.
Yep.
Where Voyagers of the Jump, I think is what it is.
Yes.
That they had. It's about 9-10 months old now. It actually came out in August.
August to October of 22, right?
Yep. And there's a 10-episode arc of them playing it.
And if you guys aren't familiar with the Glass Cannon network, you all need to listen.
Yeah.
Listening to and I say this, I'm just going to interject this if you don't mind. Listening to them and the original GCP is one of the things that got me back into role playing.
Yeah. And they did a full. I have gone between Star Trek Adventures, Modern Age, and The Expanse with the Age mechanic, and now Traveler. Not to mention some of the other little things that I've been working on the side. I have spent way too much time in the gaming realm over, I'd say, the past 10 days. And if I'm not careful, my wife will have my hide. But just from the amount of time. Luckily for me, it's not been a cost issue. It's just been a time issue.
Yeah.
Just because I have gone down the Traveler rabbit hole. So more to come on that. I got a hold of there was the Mongoose, the blueprints book with all the different blueprints of the ships. I showed that to my son last night, and he's like, and I haven't even told you this. I showed this to my son. He's like, I may want to play this.
Oh,
this is pretty cool. And then I showed him some other material I had, and he goes, yeah, I think once you get comfortable with it, I think I might want to try playing this. And that parlayed itself into, hey, my son's name is Trent. Trent, do you know that we get a lot of this with playing Star Trek or even playing The Expanse? And he goes, okay, well, next time you play, let me know. Maybe I'll listen. And so now he's a 19-year-old engineering student at university who also works pretty much full time now.
So thus with otherwise good judgment.
Yeah. So I don't understand what could, but he's also, you and I talk about this. We're very lucky that our kids, even at the ages they're at now, still aren't at a point where they think we are completely uncool or uncouth.
Not yet.
He and I went and saw the new Guardians movie on Thursday.
Yeah,
he'll still go see the Marvel and all the movies with me and all of that.
Yep.
And he might actually want to play a game at some point. So
all right.
It might be a one and done. He might all of a sudden fully realize what he's walked himself into once he's on the table with us.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, you all will be among the first to know if that happens, because we will have a full postmortem on this podcast if that happens. All right, everybody. On that note, as always, be well, stay well.
Wait, before you go.
Uh-oh.
Before we go, I have to do one thing because we haven't done it in a while, because you sent these to me.
Oh, it's funny you're going to do this. I was thinking the same thing tonight.
There. Did you hear it?
Do it again by the mic.
Did you do it? No.
No. Zoom has too good a filtering. Brad is trying to roll dice in a tray.
Hold on. No.
Nope. Kudos to Zoom's AI.
They are the Star Trek Adventures dice. So a dice set.
Well, that was quite the denouement to our episode.
Okay.
Actually, though, it does allow us to say this, though, before, which we almost forgot. This will not be the last time you hear from Mr. Jim Johnson on this podcast. Plans are already in the works for a 5th interview as early as later this summer. Brad and I are currently shopping for the promised smoking jacket.
Oh, by the way, I just got your text saying, let's go to the GM corner. I have an idea. Now I've completely broken the fourth wall.
I was going to say
about the backstory production that you never hear about with our game.
Yes, everyone's listening, thinking, yes, production in air quotes. All right, we're going to try to wrap this up for a 14th time. Be well, stay well. We will see you all in a couple of weeks.